It took Ruben Amorim a whole year to win back-to-back Premier League games. Michael Carrick's done it in his first 2 games in charge at Manchester United. Carrick's Red Revolution rolled on as United beat Arsenal 3-2 in an incredible game at the Emirates. I'm Kweku Afari, this is Tactics Exposed, and here to dissect yesterday's action is the Sun's tactical guru, Dean Scoggins. And as always, Dean's got his 5 tactical takeaways from the amazing game between Arsenal and Manchester United.
Kweku, you're back. You're back for a blockbuster episode. OK, number 1, Carrick's rope-a-dope. How United suck them in and then hit them afterwards. Number 2 is the Ballon Dorgu. Where's this come from Patrick Dorgu? Good. Absolutely amazing. But there was tactical trickery in there as well as an absolute banger. And then number 3 is the old switcheroo. Really exciting to see the new little interchanges for Manchester United, and we'll highlight that. Number 4 is Cool Hand Luke Shaw, and how he dealt with Bukayo Saka and the Arsenal right-hand side. And number 5, a little bit for the Gooners in here, you know, flop guns, but don't panic. There was some good stuff in there as well. Don't panic, lads. The title's still on.
5 of your best. I really, really like those.
Enjoying it.
We'll start with my favourite, rope-a-dope. It was an incredible display for Manchester United. And you think about Carrick's 2 first games at Man United, City in a heated derby, and then Arsenal, the best team in the league, and his tactics have worked to perfection. Yeah,
there's 2 ways of looking at this. There's one that what 2 games you don't want, Manchester City in a derby and then Arsenal away. But actually, having 2 games that are quite similar in your approach, in your setup, and the fact that not no-lose, you could get slapped 5-0 in both and it's a lot worse. But you can go about things in a way that, don't worry, if we lose, people are expecting us to lose. The attitude's changed now, so it might be quite different in the next few games. But basically, I just want to start off by showing the average position maps of the 2 games. They're virtually identical. It's like spot the difference if you can. And that's because they've played for 2 weeks in the same shape and formation. He picked the same team, as I said he would on the Team Talk
well done,
show.
you.
Thank you. And then from there, it's a case of right. They massaged it slightly, and there were a couple of other things. The first thing I'd like to talk about is how they played inside Arsenal's shape. You know what Arsenal are going to do. I've said this time and time again. Yes, they are predictable. They're really good at what they do, and whether you can stop it or not is another matter. Don't forget Arsenal scored twice at home here, right? So let's not overlook that. But Man United sat inside the shape, and we'll show right early on in the game how Manchester United wanted to set up with the midfield inside the lines. I said on the Team Talk show that Arsenal would try and stretch the game out. They did, but Man United didn't allow themselves to get dragged out into those positions and then give them space inside. And what that means is that Amad Diallo and Patrick Dorgu have to be disciplined and tuck in, really tuck in narrow. And we'll just show in a moment, we'll show the heat map. The wide play you'd expect to be up the line on the left and the right hand side, and actually a lot of their heat map was sort of inside right and inside left of that midfield. So that was really important. The second thing, as we go back to that original grab, is you just got to take a look at Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo. I mean, it was like they were brilliant, the 2 of them. What was interesting was they didn't actually win a tackle in the whole game. They didn't actually make any interceptions in the whole game, the 2 of them.
Really?
Amazing stats. But because they were in that position, and Arsenal don't play down the middle and through those gaps, they just made Arsenal recycle the ball and go round them in that dreaded horseshoe pattern over and over again. I mean, it was like the 2 of them were so close. They were like you and me to here. The whole game, it was like 2 mates on their first night out in a nightclub, not leaving each other's side. The wingman, I said last week it was like Kobbie Mainoo and his uncle in midfield. But this, when Casemiro leaves, it all feels a little bit to me like Mainoo's going to be like, where's he gone? Yeah. They're going to have to find somebody to sit in there and do a job. But those 2 were absolutely superb. And, you know, and the second thing with the formation, with playing inside the Arsenal formation, I think this is where we talk about the rope-a-dope style, is how Carrick and Steve Holland, I must say, used Arsenal's formation against them. So what they did, and I didn't notice this until like the second and third run-throughs, because I was just trying to work out what was going to happen. So when Arsenal are in their sort of shape, we know they have two sets of three players out wide. So they work, Saka, Odegaard, Timber on the right, and then the three on the left, which is often, it was Hincapié, it was Trossard, and it was Rice in those positions. So we know they're not going to go up and down the middle because Zubimendi slots in between. But what that means is, how do you make that work against them? So when United got the ball, they were actually really brave, and they did this in the first half with Dalot a lot, and then in the second half they did it with Luke Shaw, and that contributed to Dorgu's goal, where what happens is that the fullback goes up the outside, which means that the Arsenal fullback cannot tuck in. He's got to pick him up. So we'll show it on the grab first of all with Dalot, where he goes up the right-hand side, which means Hincapié has to stay out. Amad Diallo then comes into midfield, so there's nobody else to pick him up because Gabriel goes man v man on Mbeumo. Saliba was jumping out and picking up Bruno Fernandes as the 10. So that means Trossard has to come in and pick up Amad Diallo, which means then Arsenal haven't got that out ball that they want to go and play around the outside. So again, the rope-a-dope thing of, Ali sitting on the ropes, ducking all the blows, and then the killer blows came the other way. So it was really, really clever from Man United because they created this extra man in midfield. And the new formation, I don't want to dwell on Ruben Amorim, I'm not going to keep going back to it, but the new formation, they've got players up front in Bruno and Mbeumo who are always involved, and they're playing an extra man at the back. So it feels like, in effect, as opposed to the Ruben Amorim formation, that Man United have got two extra players and they use them all perfectly.
I was going to say, under Ruben Amorim, it felt like Manchester United was short in multiple areas, in that midfield area where he went with a double pivot, and going forward as well, it seemed like they were lacking an attacker. But like you mentioned, this formation seems to bring out the best in everybody. One of those players is Patrick Dorgu. He was, controversially, he was the first signing of the Ruben Amorim era at Manchester United, employed as a wing-back. Now he's drawing comparisons with Gareth Bale.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. As Gareth Bale's #1 fan, I'm not putting anybody in his league. But yeah, Patrick Dorgu, and as I say, the Ballon Dorgu. And we were going to do this, I was going to write this as the back page headline last night until the equaliser and then Mateus Cunha after that. But yeah, he was, as you say, bang on. He was the sort of archetypal wing-back in that Amorim formation, and he was brought in to play that role, and he was probably looked the most natural of all of them in that role, and then all of a sudden played him right wing towards the end, Amorim, and now he's playing left wing. But what I would say is that the way that this formation is working, it is about forming close connections. And we can see straight away that the philosophy of Carrick, Steve Holland, Jonathan Woodgate, we should mention as well from the defensive plans, is that he's making connections between players. And you can't do that when players are miles apart. It's very difficult for them to play together and little interchanges. I mentioned Kobbie Mainoo in the show last week. He did it again in this game. And again, just to dwell on that for a second, we'll show his little pass map here, where it's all little short 10-yard passes in little pockets of the field. And what that means is he's just linking play together, and he's allowing players like Dorgu to get into positions that they want to be in. And all of a sudden, United look connected is the best word. I cannot repeat that word, connected. And Michael Carrick's philosophy is to keep those players close together so that they can all play as one. And as I say, we'll show another really, really good grab of this, which is actually from the replay of the Dorgu goal, where it's Shaw this time who's been the left back who goes up, which then allows Patrick Dorgu to come inside where he wants to affect the game straight away. They've got Kobbie Mainoo really close, Bruno Fernandes really close, and that means they've got a little triangle inside Arsenal that then they can play within. And look, Declan Rice dives in a little bit. They're out of position slightly. I do want to highlight, though, again, as I love him so much, Bryan Mbeumo's movement as he takes the defence away, which creates that box of space in front of the back four. And then Dorgu, because he's come inside, because he's now not being marked by his right back, it should have been Bukayo Saka, but because he comes into midfield, nobody picks him up. He gets the space for the 1-2, but then you still got to finish it right. Wow, wow, wow. What a strike that was.
Do you think this system allows players to be a little bit more flexible? Of course, they've got to be disciplined, they've got to do their role. But like you said, the goal came from Dorgu coming inside and creates a little bit of chaos for Arsenal, and it allows them to finish the goal like that.
Yeah, and just to highlight him a little bit more, I watched him in the flesh at the Tottenham Stadium earlier in the season, and he looked paralysed by fear. It looked like he didn't know where to stand. It was like in the Amorim system, it was like when the ball goes there, you have to be there. When the ball goes back there, you have to be there. And look, if it's all been functional and working and you're winning games, you're confident in that. But they weren't winning games. So there's this indecision about where do I go. In this, and again, back to the rope-a-dope style, we sit inside a formation and then when we want to play, this is how we're going to do it. And then be free. Yeah. And then go and be footballers. You know, go and be the absolutely top-class players that you really are. And he is the epitome of that. I mean, what is it? 3 goals and an assist in his last 5 or 6 games. And yeah, he just... I mean, look at the smile on his face. Just looked like he was enjoying himself, didn't he?
A couple of worldies as well. You talked about connections and partnerships and how connected Manchester United side are. No 2 players showed that more than Amad Diallo and Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah, and Bryan Mbeumo. So all 3 of those together are working now as this little pack. And because they've almost freed up Dorgu, the trick that they're using on the right-hand side, which I'm really excited to see how it develops in the coming weeks. Because as I say, Fulham, Tottenham, West Ham in their coming games, they're not going to be defences that come out like Arsenal and Man City have done. They're going to have to adjust their way of playing, and that might be more of a test for them actually than what's just gone before. But actually what's happening is when they play out, and heaven forbid, they're almost in like a 3-4-3 shape. Sorry. But that's because Luke Shaw on one side, if they're going to go out on the right, Luke Shaw tucks in, and then as they play out. But what the cleverness is that they're really comfortable and confident in Bryan Mbeumo coming in and getting the ball. And so that means that Amad Diallo and Bruno Fernandes are looking at each other to say, right, who's going to go into the attacking space that Bryan Mbeumo has vacated? So a lot of the time it's Amad Diallo. So Bryan Mbeumo will drop in and then Amad Diallo will go into that space. And because Bruno Fernandes identified that Saliba was going to follow him around, because remember the Man City game last week where Bruno Fernandes got all that space in the box line off the midfield, what they said was, right, well, if you drag Saliba out, and Bryan Mbeumo comes to feet and Amad Diallo runs in, there's no way that Gabriel's going to leave that line as well. Yeah. So therefore there was this confusion in the old switcheroos, I've called it here, where a player comes and it's the 3rd man run. So the ball goes in, the players swap over, and then a player has gone into the space that's been vacated. And it's really exciting to see how that is going to develop. And it almost was the same thing for the Bryan Mbeumo opening goal. Look, it's a horrible mistake from Zubimendi, right? It's a horrible, horrible mistake. But they understood United where each other were going to be in the first instance. I would say that Zubimendi in the first instance has got to pass the ball either to Jurriën Timber to his right, which then he would have passed the ball into Declan Rice. Declan Rice was making this sort of attacking run up the right-hand side to try and break this very organised Man United press. And Rice makes the run and Arsenal don't give him the ball, which is something that we'll come on to where Arsenal don't take enough risks in those passing areas and back themselves to do it. And if Zubimendi doesn't pass it to Timber, just pass it to Rice in that diagonal channel. He doesn't do that, and because Declan Rice is the one trying to break the press, he actually vacates midfield. And then there's this big empty space in midfield. And then Kobbie Mainoo and Casemiro and Bryan Mbeumo and Bruno all realise that. And so therefore they think Zubimendi's in trouble now. And so Zubimendi goes back to Saliba. United come on. Saliba goes back to Zubimendi, and then obviously it's a horrible mistake, and if he plays the right pass, it goes back to the keeper, and we aren't talking about this. But because Man United are understanding where each other are going to go, because Bryan Mbeumo curves his run on the press and stops the ball going to Gabriel, and because they've realised that Declan Rice has gone, United force Arsenal into an area they don't want to be. So the understanding between those guys is really exciting for Man United going forward, because all of a sudden, in 2 weeks, as you mentioned in the intro, they feel like they've gone on 2 months for me. We should mention the Cunha goal as well. Obviously, magnificent strike. But again, it was these connections. The ball goes up to Benjamin Šeško. He wins the first ball. He's got his midfield pals right off of him, and Cunha being the one that's come on. And then as play develops with a little pass, Šeško then makes a fabulous run to take the centre-backs in the outside, in the opposite direction. Cunha sees that space on the edge of the box again and does the rest. So, yeah, they're understanding in this Carrick connections what he wants them to do, and then they're using their ability within it.
A big beneficiary of the change of system is Luke Shaw.
Absolutely.
He's a man that we haven't seen him play as a conventional left-back for a long time. but he seems to be playing his best football under Carrick.
Yeah, and one thing I got wrong in the preview shows, in the first preview show before the Man City game, was I thought Dorgu might play as a left back. Not necessarily against Manchester City, but going forward. So it'll be interesting whether against these mid-table sides that they've got coming up, and Tottenham, lower table side coming up, whether they move Dorgu to left back and then that gives them a more attacking option. I'm not saying from the start, but maybe, as the game goes on, if they haven't had enough. But what this showed was how much of a top-class left back Luke Shaw is and has always been. And what Arsenal actually had this really, really good tactical trick going on earlier in the game, and it actually benefited them in the build-up to the goal. So what they were doing is that Jurriën Timber was going up the inside, which he does a lot. He does quite in a lot of games, but he was almost in the striker position. And because Maguire and Martinez, again, who are both excellent, were occupying Gabriel Jesus and trying to think we're going to stop the striker getting the ball, that meant that Luke Shaw had to tuck in and go with Timber as he comes up that inside line. And that meant Patrick Dorgu was back in that left-back position 1v1 against Saka. And that's not what Man United wanted to happen. So very, very quickly, they have identified it on the touchline. We actually saw on the footage Carrick calling him over in a break in play and said to him, you've got to get Dorgu inside you and Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo inside you so that you can be 1v1 against Saka. And I don't really think Saka beat him. But in the build-up to the goal, it was Saka on Dorgu, then they get the ball recycled back and, they make a nuisance of themselves in the middle. Timber makes a nuisance of himself in that striker position, which means that Martinez scores the own goal. But other than that, Luke Shaw had him 1v1, pinned on the touchline, and again, Casemiro and Kobbie Mainoo, as I mentioned before, they might not have been doing loads of tackling and duel winning, but they're occupying a position behind Luke Shaw, which means when Bukayo Saka looks up, he's like, what do I do here? Even if I beat Luke Shaw, which he was struggling to do, two players are inside him. And so then again, Arsenal recycle possession, go round the outside in that dreaded horseshoe pattern. And Man United are thinking, we're inside Arsenal's shape. So, yeah, top class from Luke Shaw. Really, really good.
All right, we've lauded Manchester United. We do have to talk about Arsenal. Arsenal fans, we do have to do it. It wasn't amazing from Mikel Arteta's men. That's now 3 games without winning in the Premier League, and this is a damaging defeat against Manchester United. What went wrong at the Emirates? Yeah,
they let's be fair, they started the game in control. They're always, most of the time, in control. And but for Zubimendi's mistake, then they probably go on and win the game. Let's be honest. That gave United a lot of belief. And not to say that, United didn't deserve to win or deserve to get something from the game. But Arsenal were just safe. But to be fair to Arteta, he made those substitutions. But the problem is when he makes the substitutions is there's no freedom within them. They've all come on to try and almost do the same thing as they were doing before. And if, Rice has gone into the Zubimendi position, Marino comes on, he goes into sort of the Ødegaard position, Eze comes on in the Rice position, Madueke comes on in the Saka position, he moves Saka over to the left, which I liked, but they were different players, but they're doing the same thing.
You liked it when Saka moved to the left?
I did like it when he went to the left-hand side. Yeah, I was surprised that he did it. I thought he'd just bring Madueke on and play him on the left and leave Saka on the right. But look, Madueke's had a difficult time. The stats don't make for good reading, do they? As he goes up the right and runs the ball out of play a lot of time. But yes, it was changes, but still the same. And the problem for me with Arsenal is that the Zubimendi issue shows it. They're taking risks in their own third, and they don't take any risks in the final third. Yeah. So until they flick that switch, and this week away at Leeds, which don't come back this week for the Team Talk show, I'm going to have a look at how Arsenal can take the shackles off a little bit. He's got to figure out a way of getting Eze in this team and back to the Eze of the North London derby. He's got to figure out whether it's Gyökeres or Jesus, not because of their abilities, but because of what happens around them. I thought Jesus and Ødegaard were so disconnected, and it was like the opposite of Manchester United. That being said, look, they're still top. They're still 4 points clear. They're still the favourites, overwhelming favourites for the title. They've had a bit of a blip in 3 weeks, and I still fancy that they'll go on and do it.